decent amount of time studying this. So what do I mean by nonsense? Well,
Poquito cocky.
the Atheist Debates Patreon project presents spirituality is nonsense. And I mean that. I don't mean gibberish in the sense of like pergle burgle manergle burgle, but nonsense. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to reference some dictionaries, and as always, I'm going to say dictionaries are not authorities on meaning, they describe usage. Language is our tool to play with, and that's part of the problem, is that it's very difficult to understand what some people mean by spiritual. And after 20 plus years of interacting with folks outside of religion, I still have no real good idea what most of them are talking about. And while I'm maybe not the most intelligent person any of you have ever seen or heard from, I'm a reasonably bright guy, and I spend a decent amount of time studying this. So what do I mean by nonsense? Well, if you go to a dictionary, it's one of the secondary definitions of nonsense are things of no importance or value. And definitely spirituality so far has no importance or value to me. And until someone clearly explains what it is, that it's real, and why it should be important to me, I don't see that changing. But that's a trivial objection. Saying, oh, it's nonsense because I don't care about it, that's not an objection, and that's not what I'm here to say. I'm going with the more primary, the more prominent usage of nonsense. Words or language having no meaning or conveying no intelligible ideas. Language, conduct, or an idea that is absurd or contrary to good sense, and an instance of absurd action. And since we're talking about something that doesn't convey intelligible ideas, it's worth knowing that by intelligent, we're talking about something that is capable of being understood or comprehended, that it is apprehensible to the intellect. All right? So let's look up how dictionaries describe the word spiritual or spirituality. Spirituality relates to the human search for meaning, purpose, and connection to the sacred, transcendent, or inner self, often independent of organized religion. Cool. I don't know that that told me anything, and that's kind of broad. I mean, spirituality relates to the search for meaning and purpose, connection to the sacred, the transcendent, or the inner self. We're going to get to all of those. And spiritual is just of or relating to, consisting of, affecting the spirit. Which, okay, we'd have to look into that. But it says of or relating to sacred matters, ecclesiastical rather than lay or temporal, spiritual authority, concerned with religious values, related or joined in spirit, of or relating to supernatural beings or phenomenon, of or relating to or involving spiritualism. I'm going to assume that most people aren't into spiritualism, the religion. And so we're probably talking about this search for meaning, purpose, connection to the sacred, related to sacred matters. And okay, cool. Let's take a look at those. So first, when it comes to a search for meaning or purpose, I see no reason to think that there is any intrinsic meaning or purpose in the universe. I know that freaks so many of you out. I get it. And it's because you have had your mind polluted with an idea that there must be some intrinsic meaning or purpose, or else there is no meaning or purpose. No, that's not what I'm saying. There's plenty of imbued meaning and purpose. Things have value because there are minds that value them. I want this. I would prefer this to that. And that means that my preferred thing is of more value than this, but it's not of more value to the universe. The piece of cloth that my $1 bill is printed on has no less or more value to the universe than the piece of cloth that the $100 bill is printed on. But they're a very different value to people who are exchanging them back and forth. If you see a penny, you probably most people would just ignore it. And that's probably why there's this like find a penny, pick it up, and all the day you'll have good luck thing to kind of teach you something about value. But if you saw a silver dollar laying on the ground, you might not leave that there. If you saw a $100 bill, you're probably not going to leave that there. Things have value, but they're because we imbue them with value, not because they have any intrinsic value. Gold has no more intrinsic value to the universe than salt. And people used to get paid in salt, by the way. So that's where the term salary comes from. So if there is a search for intrinsic meaning or purpose, fine, you can go out and find that. But I see no reason to think there's any likelihood that there could be an intrinsic meaning or purpose, or that you're going to find anything, or it's going to change anything about what we actually value. The next thing to talk about is the connection to the sacred. Once again, sorry, not sorry. I see no reason to think that there is anything sacred in any real sense, in any sort of obligatory sense, though I agree that we can certainly treat things as if they were sacred. Like I treat truth and liberty as if they are sacred. It's the closest thing to what other people might mean by sacred. I put those there. Are they actually sacred? No, it's sacred to me and sacred to the other people who agree. This is just like value. There is a mind, and this is of highest value, is sort of the exaggerated, that's why we say sacred. This is of the highest value. It's a bit of hyperbole. Similarly, there's this notion about seeking a connection to the transcendent. What does transcendent mean? It means exceeding the usual limits, beyond the limits of ordinary experience. But like what? Overwhelmingly, I find that every time I hear, ooh, that was transcendent, it is mere hyperbole. In the same way that sacred is hyperbole for valuable, transcendent is hyperbole for neat. Like one of my pet peeves is that the word unique means one of a kind. And to borrow from the West Wing, something can't be very unique. I know it's a silly pet peeve. I try not to get too upset about it. But something cannot be very unique. But that doesn't stop people from using the term very unique. It hurts me to say that. Just like it hurts me to say nuclear instead of nuclear. But people use the phrase very unique, but what they're doing is they're engaged in hyperbole. They are exaggerating for emphasis. And I love poetry and language enough that I can forgive it, but it still kind of pokes that little thing in the back of my brain like, that's wrong. But nothing about something that is unique, nothing makes it more unique, very unique, especially unique. Transcendent just means beyond the ordinary. And that is contingent on what your ordinary is. If you hear a new style of music that is different from anything you've ever heard, it would be very easy to describe that as transcendent because it transcends your ordinary. But to somebody else, that is their ordinary. To somebody else, it's banal, tedious. This is why when music trends shift, when the Beatles show up and they go and they get Indian influences of instruments that people in the West aren't used to hearing and styles and time signatures that people aren't used to seeing, they incorporate into that music, that stuff into their music, and all of a sudden it becomes transcendent. But that doesn't mean there's something that's actually transcendent. So once again, it's hyperbole of this is really cool. What about a connection to the inner self? What inner self are we talking about? I don't see any reason to think there's a soul, and I see plenty of good reasons to be extremely confident that there is no such thing as a soul. But at best, at my most charitable, I would argue that this is probably more about aspects of your personality that you aren't aware of or didn't grasp. And that's just because our psychology is complicated, complex, and we are not always able to grasp who we are and what we think and why we do these things. And that's why we need assistance. This is why psychology is important. This is why something like the Secular Therapy Project is important, because that is science-based exploration of what's going on in your head to help you with issues. This is why therapy and counseling are important. I didn't ever used to go. I have a therapist now, and I'm getting. There are certain things that I experienced anxiety about and had no idea I was even engaged in experiencing anxiety, because the description of anxiety I got from others was different than that. I'm never, like, very rarely would I get like catatonic in anxiety, but teaching me to be mindful and engage in looking at how and why I respond to things in different ways and how I can go about potentially altering those. That's important. Is it physics? Is it chemistry? No, it's a softer science, but it is about something identifiably real, demonstrable, and coming up with the tools to deal with it. By the way, Secular Therapy Project, highly recommended. I support recoveringfromreligion.org and seculartherapy.org. If you need assistance, by all means, go there, and you won't, whether you're religious or not, if you go to seculartherapy.org, you will get recommendations of therapists who are using science-based, reason-based, evidence-based treatments instead of offering you pseudoscience and religion. And it says in the definition that it can be often independent of organized religion. We'll get back to that because it definitely says organized religion. But it also implies that it's somewhat about religion, that it affects the soul or the spirit, which I don't think is real. But I'm fine with a poetic spirit, like our spirit of adventure, our spirit of inquiry. Those are fine. Metaphors and poetry, it's great. It's our best way to describe what's in there. But it's when you take those things and try to make them literal that you lose me. Now, if you have a different definition of spirituality, then first, sorry, yours wasn't sufficiently popular to make it into the dictionary that describes popular usage. So you have a particularly esoteric use of spirituality. I'm happy to hear yours and let you try to defend that, whether you're religious or not. Tell me what it is, demonstrate that what you're referring to is real, and show me that it is deserving of pursuit or reverence. There are people who say that they are spiritual but not religious. There are people who say they are engaged in non-religious spirituality, and there are people who say they are involved in no-nonsense spirituality. And then there's plenty of other labels. To me, the first thing you've got to do is tell me what it is that you're studying. What do you mean by spirituality? What are you striving to grasp or teach? And how can we be confident that it's real and not just a construct, an expression of hyperbole for something that isn't there but you wish was there? Because I'm convinced that we're speaking about people who don't like organized religions, or found their way out of an organized religion, or found that the organized religion lied to them, but they missed the community, or they missed the mystery, or they missed the feeling of there was some kind of feeling there. I stood in church. I felt goosebumps. I felt elated. I felt like I was filled with the Spirit, because that's what people around me would say. The experience that I had is real, psychologically real. It is triggerable by all kinds of things. It doesn't mean there's a spirit or a soul. It doesn't mean there's not. But there are people who miss that, and who want to find a way to not just experience that again, but to potentially understand it. There are other people who miss the, tell me what to do because I don't want to have to think for myself. That is it's not me, but that is definitely a contingent of the population would rather have someone just instruct them. This is why we get gurus and life coaches and things like that. So those people will latch on to spiritual or spirituality because it is sufficiently ill-defined as to be largely immune from criticism. It is devoid of testable, identifiable content. It is nonsense. Spiritual and spirituality, as far as I can tell, and we'll get to the point where you can prove me wrong, is nonsense. It does not contain any clear, identifiable, testable, real proposition. It is hyperbole and poetic wishful thinking. It is an unfalsifiable proposal that operates almost entirely, it seems, on vague feelings and the posturing that by you and I using the same word, spiritual, we mean the same thing when we probably don't. It is a performance of understanding with no demonstration of any actual understanding. And that's how you end up with Christian diploma mills, unaccredited Christian diploma mills passing out degrees or master's degrees to people who aren't religious and aren't Christian, but are willing to part with some money to become spiritual mentors. That's how you wind up with ex-religious pastors offering you the chance to become a certified spiritual director for $5,000. And if you're really good, or one of the only people who bother to pony up the money, you could even wind up as the new instructor and get a piece of the pie while touting all of your store-bought credentials and being a life coach with a new label. And no more demonstration that you're anything other than a guru using sophistry to exploit people's desires, weaknesses, confusion, and frustration to make a buck. Now, don't get me wrong, there are probably good people, well-intentioned people, trying to do this, trying to engage in spirituality and even trying to teach it. And there are also scam artists trying to do this, but I don't know how to tell the difference, which is why they're making up their own certifications. This is not a recognized real anything. There's nothing sensical about it. Sensical should probably be sensible, but none of them seem to be able to offer any clarity. None of them seem to be able to demonstrate that their area of study, their area of expertise is real. Exactly like clergy people. Clergy people aren't experts in God. They're experts in religion, maybe, and the book, maybe, but nothing that the book or the religion points to is demonstrated as anything that you could have an expertise about. None of them seem to be able to demonstrate that their methods are effective or beneficial or useful beyond the placebo effect of affirmation. And affirmation is so important. We crave it. Affirmation and understanding. They are a comfort blanket that allows you to avoid confusion and anxiety. And you can run around collecting credentials and certifications. You can even become ordained in as many untestable, unfalsifiable religious and pseudoscientific disciplines as you like. I've seen ordained this and ordained that, and secular counselor and spiritual directors, which is just a way of saying, hey, look, this group has said that I understand how to make their nonsense feel like it makes sense. But none of it's science, none of it's demonstrated reliability, and no amount of store-bought certifications will ever mean that this isn't nonsense. It's just a circle jerk of affirmation of nonsense. And affirmation is needed because religions have done massive harm. And we are fragile. And we are confused, and we're desperate to understand and grasp something significant. In part, we have that need somewhat, I would argue, naturally, but it has been exploited and amplified by the pretense that our suspicions can in fact be confirmed. Because the reality is that if something doesn't make sense to us, we're frustrated. We are a species that craves understanding. So if you're served up some nonsense, and you recognize that it's nonsense, you just ignore it. Or dismiss it, or argue against it. But if you're served up some nonsense, but somebody manages to convince you that if you just work hard enough, like they did, you will be able to understand it. And it is very, very, very important for you to understand this. And they'll be happy to help you and even certify your success for $5,000 or $4,000 or $19,000 or whatever it is. It feels like it's not nonsense. It's playing on your fear of missing out. They have found the secret. I should be able to find it too. When there's no demonstration that they've found any secret at all. Like genuinely, I keep asking these people to offer any defense, any definition that they would like to defend, any demonstration that they actually understand the subject they're promoting, that the subject makes sense. And the closest any of these have come to an honest defense is by saying something like, hey, I don't understand it either. We're all just searching here. I just know it's real, and I'm sorry you're not there yet. They'll spin the language. It's non-religious spirituality. It's no-nonsense spirituality. It's secular spirituality. You can be a spiritual director. You can be a spiritual life coach. You can be a spiritual guru for only $19.99. Maybe it's a weaker version of Dumbo's magic feather. But they won't give you the feather, which would make the claim testable. That's the key thing about Dumbo's magic feather, is that you didn't need the feather at all. And the appeal of, oh, the power was within you all the time. That's a great, powerful message. Doesn't mean it's a great, good quality message, but it's a powerful one because it is specifically empowering people. And if this was a version of Dumbo's magic feather and they're not giving you the feather, they're also not able to demonstrate that you can fly. They're just willing to tell you that they're confident that you can eventually fly, and so can they. And they'll give you a certificate that shows that you've taken their course, where you learned their unproven method for trying to learn how to fly. So in response, not only do I challenge every single non-religious spiritual person, and yeah, if you're a religious spiritual person, you're challenged too, but I'm more irritated by the people who are doing it in the pretense of, ooh, this is non-religious. It's you don't have to be religious and you can still pretend you understand something. I challenge them all to debate the merits and reality of the subject and methods that they claim are real. You can call into the shows, you can book a debate. Pick your representative. Maybe one of the people who's offering certifications in this, I will debate them for free. Because I want to know, if this is real, have I missed out? Is this demonstrable? What am I missing? Or is this a scam that is preying on people and their fears? So in addition to that challenge, I'd also like to say that I'm thinking about starting up my own certification course. For only $4,000 instead of $5,000, I will train you and offer you the chance to become a certified skeptical detective. It'll be cheaper, and it will be more demonstrably useful than anything any of the yes nonsense spirituality advocates are offering. And if you need help, reach out to the Psychotherapy Project for actual help. You don't need a guru. See you next time.
Simply receive raw reality. Hi everyone, Britt here with No Nonsense Spirituality. This is going to be a new kind of video for me because I have received what I think is friendly fire from Matt Dillahunty, who most of you may know. And he made a whole video referring to me and also Jim Palmer, who runs the Center of Non-Religious Spirituality. He made a whole video called Spirituality is Nonsense and mentioned me in that video. So today I will be responding to some critiques, and I'm curious to see what you guys think about this, because many of you value Matt Dillahunty's work in the atheist space, specifically all the work that he has done debating theists of various religions. Now, some of his critiques I think are fair. Some of it I think is semantics. Some of it is going to be some fundamental differences between him and I. And some of the critiques I think are unfair. There's some of it that I think was punching down a little bit. So I'm going to go over his arguments and steelman them as best I can and respond and see what you think at the end of this. And my purpose in doing this is not to convince Matt or any of you to use the word spirituality or to claim yourself as a spiritual person, but to prove that there is space for both of us and for what we do in the atheistic and secular communities. So this is a bit of like Hamilton and Aaron Burr. There was room in this world for Hamilton and me before we kind of start firing shots at each other here. So my first point that I want to address is the word spirituality, his qualms with it, how I define it, evidence to support it, and why I use that term instead of other words. So let's take a look at what he says here.
So what do I mean by nonsense? Well, if you go to a dictionary, it's one of the secondary definitions of nonsense are things of no importance or value. And definitely spirituality, so far, has no importance or value to me. And until someone clearly explains what it is, that it's real, and why it should be important to me, I don't see that changing. But that's a trivial objection. You're saying, oh, it's nonsense because I don't care about it. That's not an objection, and that's not what I'm here saying. I'm going with a more primary, more prominent usage of nonsense. Words or language having no meaning or conveying no intelligible ideas. Language, conduct, or an idea that is absurd or contrary to good sense, and an instance of absurd action. And since we're talking about something that doesn't convey intelligible ideas, it's worth knowing that by intelligent, we're talking about something that is capable of being understood or comprehended.
So his first claim is that this word is too vague to be of any use or meaning, and because it's so vague, it just invites charlatans into this space. And honestly, this is a fair frustration. The word spirituality is used badly all the time. It gets used to mean ghosts and vibes and manifestation and crystals and energy and intuition and psychedelics and just having emotions. So if Matt's argument is that the word is often vague, I agree, but vague usage does not mean that there's no real subject matter to contend with. There are many words that we use in the English language that are too broad to define. Words like love, for example, are very difficult to define, certainly difficult to put into a beaker. But with love, even though it's used in a variety of ways, we can still ground that in the human experience. We can talk about how humans feel and act with love. We can even look at brain scans when we're talking about being in love. We can have objective conversations about subjective realities. We can do brain scans of monks who are doing loving kindness meditations and see that their user default mode in their brain, that part of their brain that is self-obsessed, is really quiet during that meditation, for example. And I want to do the same thing with spirituality, that there's an element of spirituality that we can ground in the human experience, even if it's true that that term is sometimes used in vague woo-woo ways that I wouldn't support. So then Matt goes on to give a definition from the dictionary on spirituality.
Relates to the human search for meaning, purpose, and connection to the sacred, transcendent, or inner self, often independent of organized religion.
So let's work with this definition that he gave, because I don't want to make a Jordan Peterson move here and start just making up definitions. He said spirituality relates to the human search for meaning, purpose, and connection to the sacred, transcendent, or inner self, often independent of organized religion. So fine, if that's the definition, then the question becomes whether meaning, purpose, a sense of sacredness, even just as an experience or transcendence, or a curiosity with your inner life, can be understood. Can we do all of that without supernaturalism? And the answer is yes. There was nothing in that definition that defined connection to the self or connection outside of self as something that requires the supernatural. In fact, it says it's often independent of organized religion. So then you can say, okay, give me data and evidence that this thing that we're pointing to exists and that it's something that we should contend with. Happy to do so. Because for me, just so Matt knows, I'm not sure how familiar he actually is with my work versus just the title of my platform. So just so you know, Matt, I don't believe in God. I'm an outspoken atheist. I don't believe in the soul. I don't believe in a spiritual realm. I don't believe in manifestation. I don't believe in the self. I think the self is an illusion. I don't believe in free will. This, for me, when I talk about spirituality, is all grounded in human experience. But let's talk about evidence for this definition that you gave so we can try to ground it. So first you say that spirituality is related to the human search for meaning, and our brains are meaning makers. That's what they do. We do not simply receive raw reality. We interpret it, we organize it. Our brain filters reality without us even intending to. So you say that you see no evidence that the universe has any intrinsic meaning. I'm a nihilist. I agree with you. I don't think that the universe has any intrinsic meaning, but the definition that you gave did not specify that meaning has to come from the universe. And so when I say meaning matters, I do not mean that the universe has a secret mission statement written into the stars or that there's a supernatural realm that we can be accessing. I mean that humans are the kind of animal that psychologically needs some kind of coherent relationship to reality in order to function. Our brains like to know what matters, what pain means, what we're responsible for, what we can let go of, what kind of life we're trying to build. It needs a way to orient, and we have evidence that this matters. In a 2017 systemic review and meta-analysis, found that meaning in life is associated with far better physical health outcomes. It doesn't mean that having meaning in your life means that you'll never be sick, but it does give you a lot more resilience. It means that there is a measurable relationship between having meaning in your life, being able to define the meaning of your life, and doing better across health-related matters. You don't have to, none of that has to be contained within the supernatural. All of that can be built from the ground up. Another large study of almost 7,000 U.S. adults over age 50 found that stronger purpose of life was associated with lower all-cause mortality. Again, that doesn't mean that purpose is just a magic vitamin, but it does mean that purpose is not just some fluffy, poetic extra. It is connected to how humans function and cope and behave and even survive. So if Matt's critique is there is no cosmic meaning, there is no intrinsic cosmic meaning, I agree. But if the critique is, therefore meaning is nonsense, or therefore meaning building or meaning seeking is nonsense, then that's a leap that I don't follow. Secular spirituality does not have to claim that meaning comes from God or the universe or the soul or a supernatural realm. It can say something much more modest and much more evidence-based, that humans need meaning structures, that humans suffer when those meaning structures collapse, that humans can rebuild meaning without lying to themselves, and some practices, some communities, some rituals, some philosophies, and some forms of inner work help people do that better than others. That is not nonsense. That is the work of being human after certainty dies and after religious frameworks fail. And that is also a place where when we talk about the meaning crisis, that it seems that humans are needing some help with, that it's not something that they always just know intuitively how to do. Now, Matt will say here that this is just psychology and not spirituality, but just give me a chance here to lay all this out. Just hold on to that thought, I beg you. So under the umbrella term of spirituality is not just developing meaning, but also connection. And yes, we have data on human ability to feel subjectively a feeling of connectedness to something outside of yourself that has real impact on human experience and real impact on behavior. If someone invites you to an experience that evokes awe, it is not just hyperbole. Matt says in this video that this word transcendence is just a hyperbole for neat. But awe is a real area of psychological research. Researchers usually define awe as an emotion we experience when we encounter something vast that challenges our current mental frames. That can be physical vastness, like looking out at the night sky. It can be conceptual vastness, like when you're trying to study deep time or evolution. It can be moral vastness, like watching someone do something courageous or compassionate. It can be aesthetic vastness, like music and art and architecture. And the important thing is that awe does something to the self. A major 2015 study shows that awe tends to create what researchers call the small self. That doesn't mean self-hatred. It just means that a illusion of the self or the ego in the brain or the default mode network becomes less central. People feel less like the main character of the universe and more part of a larger whole. And we have this across several studies that awe is associated with pro-social behavior, more generosity, more ethical decision-making, and a greater willingness to help others. That is why we can look at the brains of Buddhist meditators and see that they're less neurotic, they're less self-obsessed, they're more happy, more generous than other brains. We have a study where you're doing some kind of worksheet, but you're guided into a feeling of awe while looking at some beautiful landscape, and the instructor will drop their pencils, and people are more likely to help you pick it up than if you were doing the same worksheet just staring at a concrete wall. We have studies that show that if you that you will draw yourself bigger on a piece of paper if you don't experience awe than if you do. You'll literally draw a picture of yourself smaller after you spend some time looking at the night sky. It changes how you interact with the world. You're more likely to let go of grudges. We even have some evolutionary reasons for this, where it helps the bonds of a tribe to have these moments that allow us to break out of our usual self-obsessed, resentful way of thinking, resentful way of interacting with each other. There's also research showing that awe can change your relationship to time. A 2012 study showed that people who experienced awe felt like they had more available time. They were less impatient. They were more willing to volunteer their time. They preferred experiences over material products. They had greater life satisfaction. And again, none of this requires supernaturalism. We also have brain research here that in 2019, an fMRI study found that awe-inducing videos reduced activity in parts of the default mode network that is associated with our self-referential thinking and our mind wandering and the narrative self. So I wouldn't say that like awe turns off the ego in some sloppy guru way, but I can say that there's neuroscience suggesting that awe may reduce certain forms of self-focused processing, which lines up with the behavioral research that people feel smaller, feel more connected, feel less trapped in their usual, self-talk loops. And so awe is not just, wow, that's neat. Awe moves people from me to we. This is why religions have always used awe and cathedrals and chanting and incense and stained glass and pilgrimage and mountains and silence and music. All of this works because humans are awe-responsive animals. Religion didn't invent awe, it just organized it. Awe is an emotional state with measurable effects. And if I say just go experience beauty, people hear self-care. If I say go outside, people hear wellness. If I say look at the stars, people hear just like, oh, what a nice experience. But if I say you need contact with awe because your ticker tape of self-obsessed neuroticism is suffocating you, now we're actually getting closer to what humans have traditionally meant by having a spiritual experience. And we can talk about the science of ritual too. I'll be more brief here as I think you're getting my point. Rituals are not evidence that the supernatural is real. Rituals are evidence that humans are embodied, social, symbolic animals. Rituals scientifically help us mark values, process emotions, process grief, increase pleasure, and decrease pain. The example that I always give is two groups of people. They're both promised that both groups are promised that one person is going to win $300. One person actually does, and they walk out. And then one group of people does nothing, and they stew over it the rest of the day, and they're stuck in their emotions about it, and they're upset about it the rest of the day that they didn't get the $300. The other group does a made-up ritual, just completely made up. They write about it, they put some salt on it, they crumple it up, they throw it over their left shoulder, and when asked about it later, they've completely forgotten the experience, like they've processed it out of their bodies. So even when rituals are made up, they help us process emotions out of our body. And we have neuroscience suggesting that rituals can affect the way that we respond even to failure. We have a 2015 study showing that colleagues found that ritualized behavior reduces the neural response to moral failure. So when I mean ritual, I don't mean things that you do in order to get into heaven. I mean lighting a candle before writing can tell your body, okay, now we're beginning this activity. Or a funeral can tell your body, this person is gone, but this is how we grieve together. A graduation can tell a young person you're crossing a threshold. A weekly family dinner can tell children this is who we are. A morning walk can tell your nervous system, I'm still participating in the world. These are rituals. And one of the strongest areas of research is ritual and social bonding. A lot of religious rituals involve people moving and chanting, singing, kneeling, standing, clapping, and breathing together. And there's research showing that our brains like this. And there's research showing that this synchronous movement increases cooperation and social attachment. You yourself, Matt, found yourself singing together with people, and that's not proof that the words are doctrine just because you had a feeling, but you did have a feeling with this ritual that you had on Sundays. Now again, you may just call this psychology, but hold on, just hold on, let me cook. Next in your definition, you also include inner work and the connection to the self. Now I agree with you here that there's no evidence of a soul. You speak of this as just personality. Fine. But there's a whole universe within you of things to explore and better and worse ways to do that. There are tools that help with meeting the part of you that you're most ashamed of. That's called shadow work. For example, it helped me improve my relationship with myself and reduce shame when I did shadow work around my postpartum rage with the violent, intrusive thoughts that I was ashamed of that showed up when I was the mother of young children. We have tools to help you determine your core values, your motivations. If you come from religion, especially if you're a woman and a queer person, you may not know anything about who you are. You may need some help with things like determining what your core values are, or what motivates you, or what kind of personality that you have. You have existential fears. As you know from terror management theory, so much of what we do is driven by our deep unconscious fear of death. But we have other existential fears too that drive us. Existential loneliness, moral injury, fear of freedom, fear of meaninglessness. And there are better and worse tools to explore these inner spaces. Even if you don't believe in free will, which I don't, I think there's value in the journey of exploring more and more of the inputs of the system that create the outputs of the behavior that I do in my life. Now, my guess here is that you don't have a lot of objection to the science that I'm bringing up, but you would just call this philosophy, psychology, sociology, etc. And let me go then to your objection to why I would use any of that under the umbrella term of spirituality when I'm doing this from a completely secular point of view. So one reason is that when you put all of this together, the meaning, the purpose, the rituals, the exploration of connecting outside of you and also connecting inside of you. When you put all of that together, we don't have a secular word that means everything under this umbrella. Meaning, purpose, awe, states of transcendence that we can see in the brain and in human behavior, cultivating wisdom because it's hard to be a human, ritual, rites of passage that are good for the brain, connection, the ways that you feel connected to something bigger than yourself. Even if it's just nature or the human story, we have the whole world of inner work and meditation, existential fears, motivations, thought work, learning about different aspects of the human psyche and how they show up with you, working with aspects of yourself towards growth and development. We have science behind all of these things. These are things that are good for you. These are the markers of human thriving, human well-being, and human development. And we don't have a word that means everything that we did under the umbrella of spirituality. The meaning, purpose, ritual, community, narratives, heroes, inner work, awe, etc. We don't have a word that means all of that for secularism. We can kind of get there with well-being, but again, that's just going to be another vague term. So like you're just replacing one vague term with another. So we can talk about the science of well-being, but I don't think it goes far enough into the tools, all the tools that we have under the umbrella of this term spirituality. So my first rebuttal is we don't have secular language for this space that means everything that has been under the term spirituality. Even Sam Harris, who is an atheist, who is not exactly known for being soft on religion, who has, I think, debated with you, like on your team, uses the word spirituality for this reason. He says there isn't another good word for the domain of disciplined practices and experiences that transforms human experience and connects that transformation to ethics. So he tried for hours to use a different word and found that there wasn't a good one. Would you really call Sam Harris a scam artist or not an atheist because he uses that word for all the things that I was just talking about? Sam Harris has probably brought more people to secularism than anyone else. Does he not deserve to be on the team because he also couldn't find a better word? Many atheists you admire, for example, Carl Sagan, used the word spirituality. He said, and I quote, "Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it's a profound source of spirituality." And Carl Sagan goes on to say, despite usage to the contrary, there is no necessary implication in the word spiritual that we are talking about anything other than matter or anything outside the realm of science. Carl Sagan's daughter wrote a wonderful book as a secular person, raised secular, on the science of ritual and its value for secular families in building family culture so that Gen Z is getting all the benefits of order and structure and identity and ritual and belonging and all of that for families. So I'm not inventing new usage for this term. Many atheists, begrudgingly, myself included, find that there's not a secular word that means everything that we want it to mean. So that's my first rebuttal. My second argument is that not including spirituality in the secularism space does secularism a disservice. If we give religion exclusive ownership over words like spiritual, sacred, ritual, transcendence, awe, meditation, confession, pilgrimage, moral formation, then religion wins the territory that it never should have owned. And this is where Alain de Botton's work is useful in Religion for Atheists. He says we shouldn't just mock religion, we should be stealing from it. We should be taking away its monopoly over this aspect of our lives, because religions are packed with ideas about how humans might live in arranged society. And so his own description of the book says that of his own book says rather than mocking religions, atheists should steal from them while rejecting the supernatural claims. Again, another self-proclaimed atheist who will steal back these words in order that religion not have a monopoly on them. This is another quote from him. The challenge facing atheists is how to reverse the process of religious colonization, how to separate ideas and rituals from the religious institutions who have laid claim to them but don't truly own them. That's his quote. This is a religious inquisition in reverse. Religions steal things from wherever and integrates them into the religion. Part of the secular project that you and I are both committed to is committing to reversing that process. And that means we shouldn't allow religion to have the only language for these kinds of human experiences that we have solid science shows changes our behavior and changes our brains. Otherwise, we give religion what it wants, a monopoly on anything that is of value in that space. And this is why I think we failed Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, as you know, was the golden child of atheism. She's the 5th member of the new atheist movement, Apocalypse. She was supposed to be there with the other 4 atheists in their conversation that they recorded. An ardent ex-Muslim, a great golden child of atheism, to great cost to her security. But she hid in existential depression. She didn't have Jesus meet her in a vision and then just became Christian. She didn't have enough in secularism to hold on to. She started to get nihilistic. She started to get some depression. And she found herself walking into a Christian church. And while she's free to do so, and I would fight for her right to do so, in order to do that, she had to split her psyche in half. She openly says, I keep my science brain over here and my Christian spirituality over here. She had to cut herself in half to get tools for life that she wasn't finding in secularism, but she found in another Abrahamic religion. Now, you may disagree with her or debate her, but in some real sense, we in secularism, we failed her. We fail all those who feel like secularism is not enough to give them tools for life and tools for existential concerns. And people will go back to religion when they feel like there's not enough tools here and not enough openness to the full human experience, and that's on us. So for me, using the term spirituality would help people like Ayaan if she wished to combat existential depression that she was facing and rebuild after religion, rebuild whatever was positive for her psychologically that came from religion so that she wouldn't have had to do that. I don't think that that makes me a charlatan. I think it makes me a more effective bridge builder for people coming from religion. I want them to take whatever baby they have with them, whatever experiences they hold as sacred, and just leave the bathwater and come over here. And by using the term spirituality, this is what I feel like I'm doing. I'm walking into a church with its priesthoods and tithing and sex scandals and abuse of women, and I'm saying, you've had a monopoly on some of this good stuff. I'm taking it back. I'm taking awe back. I'm taking ritual back. You don't own it. I'm taking confession back, but now it just means honesty and repair, not sin management. I'm taking pilgrimage back, where we have intentional places to travel to in order to have an experience. We're taking sacredness back. We're taking moral formation back. We're taking community back. And we're taking contemplation back. And we're taking death practices back. And we're taking spirituality back. And saying that I'm a spiritual atheist is just a shortened way to say that. I'm taking all of that back. And anyone leaving that space that found value in any of that stuff, bring it over. We want it on our team. Just leave the bathwater. Another example of how I think this is the better approach is that 2/3 of atheists who do a hero's dose of psilocybin do not support as atheists after that. We have to talk about this. Like, no, they don't go back to Abrahamic religion. They never go back to the Abrahamic God. But they find themselves after a profound peak experience like that. Again, not one where they're just listening to something new, but something that really changed them, changed how they viewed the world and themselves, where the illusion of the self drops away and they feel at one with the universe, whether or not the universe cares about that. They don't find any space or language to talk about those kinds of experiences, which are real human experiences, in atheistic spaces. And because of that, they will no longer self-identify as an atheist because they feel atheism to be too limiting to what they just experienced. And that is a failure. That is a failure. Like, if you do mushrooms and can't call yourself an atheist because of it, because you have no language in that space to talk about it, or you're going to be mocked for it, then religion, by necessity, by default, has a monopoly on these experiences. Then you feel like you have to go back to religion in order to make sense of that experience. And that does atheism a disservice. Claiming the word spiritual means that I'm combating religion's monopoly on human experience, including human experiences that we have put under the umbrella of spirituality. That helps secularism, because it says take your experiences, dust off the bullshit and the interpretation of those experiences, and bring it on over here. Otherwise, we leave people at the mercy of religion because we have no room in atheism for their full human experience. Now, my third argument for why I use this word and not other words like well-being is that atheism has historically been very good at deconstruction and not very good at reconstruction. And that's by default, right? Atheism is just, I'm not convinced of a theistic God. I'm not convinced of this. And I'm not insulting atheism. Like, I am an atheist. Atheism gave my intellectual honesty back. It gave me permission to say, I'm not convinced that this is true. The atheist debates gave me tools to recognize bad arguments or authority abuse or fear-based theology or religious claims that couldn't hold up under certainty. But atheism by itself, you know, we all admit this, is not a full operating system. It doesn't claim anything other than just a negation. It makes no ultimate claims on what reality is or how you should order your life. And so that leaves a mountain of human questions unanswered. And this is where I think secular spaces fail people, because atheism is too small to hold the whole human experience. And the lie of atheism, if there was one, is saying that if you just walk out of a church building, you'll just stumble upon the good life. You'll just know how to do this. Like, atheism is just a position on the God question. It's not a grief ritual. It's not a rite of passage. It's not a new family culture. It's not a funeral. It's not a moral formation system. It doesn't give you any kind of belonging. It's not a way to, you know, metabolize awe. It's not a structure for existential reconstruction. And when we pretend that it is enough, people will often go look elsewhere. And when you shame the experience, religion gets to interpret it, and that's the problem. So Matt, when you said that spirituality as a definition is something just out of the ordinary, your example for that was a bit of a straw man, where you say that it's just like hearing Beatles music for the first time when they went to India, and you know, George uses a sitar and Indian time signatures for the first time.
Transcended just means beyond the ordinary. And that is contingent on what your ordinary is. If you hear a new style of music that is different from anything you've ever heard, it would be very easy to describe that as transcendent, because it transcends your ordinary. But to somebody else, that is their ordinary. To somebody else, it's banal, tedious. This is why when music trends shift, when the Beatles show up, And they go and they get Indian influences of instruments that people in the West aren't used to hearing, and styles and time signatures that people aren't used to seeing. They incorporate into that music, that stuff into the music, and all of a sudden it becomes transcendent. But that doesn't mean it's something that's actually transcendent. So once again, it's hyperbole of this is really cool.
That's a bit of a straw man. No one I know has changed their behavior or their brain has changed because they heard Norwegian Wood for the first time. Maybe some did, but probably not. It may be a new experience, it may be neat and interesting, as you say, but that is not what people mean when they say that they had a transcendent experience or a spiritual experience. When astronauts look at Earth from space, that is not just a Beatles song with a sitar. It changes them forever afterwards. And researchers call this the overview effect. This is the cognitive shift that astronauts report when they see Earth from space. And a review from Yaden and colleagues describes it as an experience of awe and self-transcendence, often involving overwhelming emotion, a sense of beauty, and an increased identification with humanity and the planet as a whole that changes their behavior when they return. It was not just that was a neat experience or that was new. It altered their values. It altered their environmental concerns. It changed their sense of belonging to the planet. They come back forever changed. Same thing with psychedelics. People will forever change after a peak experience with psychedelics. Same thing with something morally profound. Like I just saw Les Mis when it came to town, and even though I don't believe that the bishop has the one true priesthood, I do believe that there are stories where something equivalent to 2 candlesticks and human kindness has changed a person's life. So when people talk about a transcendent or spiritual experience, they do not just mean I encountered something different or out of the ordinary. They mean an experience that reorganized their sense of self and their values or their place in the world. And we have science on that because we can show that their behavior changes. So I'm not trying to make atheism less rational. I'm not trying to smuggle in the woo. I'm trying to make atheism less emotionally illiterate, because people are not just belief machines. They are not robots. They are meaning-making animals. They are grieving animals. They are ritual animals. They are awe-responsive animals. They are attachment animals. They are storytelling animals. And when someone leaves religion, because the majority of people I work with are people deconstructing from religion, they're just not losing they don't just lose an argument. They lose their cosmology, how to place themselves in the universe, their calendar, their family structure, their rituals, their songs, their death story, their moral community, their sense of being held somehow in the universe, their answer to suffering, their sense of ultimate concern. And if all we can offer them is, well, at least you're not wrong anymore, that's not enough. And that's where secular spirituality comes in. It's not a replacement for skepticism. It's the continuation of skepticism into the rest of life. And that helped me because for me, the death of God personally, with no tools from secularism at the time, flung me into nihilism. And if most of the deconstruction space is just talking about how we're better than religious people and how they're stupid, and I'm full-on suicidal, struggling with nihilism, struggling with the ethics of what it means to be alive, it's not enough. Like that atheist chip on your shoulder that I'm smarter than everyone else is not enough. There are some things that we learn outside of religion about the nature of reality that can be hard, that can be troubling, that we need help with, that can even make your life harder. So my argument to you, Matt, is if we co-evolved with religion, if evolutionarily religion is a cognitive technology that we created for various things that help us as humans, then simply leaving religion is not enough. Religions have had thousands of years to develop tools for humans. Sometimes religion will increase certain anxieties like fear and hell, but a lot of times religion is actually soothing many anxieties. And religions have had thousands of years to develop this. And so if we're expecting the average person who is not a philosopher, not a psychologist, not a neuroscientist, not a sociologist, not an anthropologist, to make sense of all that and rebuild all of that in one lifetime, especially when they have religious trauma, that's a hard ask. And so when secularism includes secular spirituality, it gives a space for these rebuilding conversations that are so needed in the secular space. So I'll leave that there. My guess is that you're somewhat okay with all of that. and your critique now is going to be that there's no need of me, right? That this can and should be done in therapy. You mentioned the Secular Therapy Project, you mentioned recovering from religion, and so there's no need for people like spiritual directors to be doing any of this. That's my guess that you know what your critique would be now. And so this is one area that I want to push back on. If there was nothing of value that I'm doing in helping people build meaningful, even spiritual lives without forcing them to do that with a God or the supernatural, then why do the therapists from the Secular Therapy Project talk to me, send their clients to me, send my content I put out for free on YouTube to their clients for free, come to be trained by me or to work with me so that they can know how to better work with their clients? There's a gap here that I'm filling that is a real gap. If the Secular Therapy Project and if therapists could do all of that work, therapists wouldn't be reaching out to me for help in this area. Therapy is great. I've used therapy for various aspects of my life. Therapy did not help me when I was in an existential crisis, paralyzed by deep philosophical questions. Therapy in the data tends to not be effective for existential depression and nihilism unless you are meeting with an existential therapist, which is an additional training you can get in your therapy program. So therapy didn't help me locate the ways that my brain was still religious and how to shift that. Therapy didn't help me with the deep philosophical questions that I was asking. So you want something concrete here. What are things that I do that people in the therapists in the Secular Therapy Project refer people to me for? One is exploring different spiritual paths. For example, with an existential crisis, the isms that tend to be most helpful with that are Stoicism, Buddhism, existentialism, absurdism, and optimistic nihilism. I can tell which kinds of these personalities or needs can lead you to benefit from one over another. A therapist doesn't have the philosophical depth for that, to explore that one-on-one. And when you just go to YouTube and just get on, abstract philosophy videos, you're not getting the one-on-one help you need to explore these new isms. I give language to religious deconstruction, what they're missing and what they're mourning. And specifically because I work with Christians and Mormons, I have a sense of how that brain works, and I can get to those often faster than a therapist. I can pinpoint which of the existential fears is giving someone a problem deconstructing and giving them a lot of hesitation and the best tools for them to face that fear directly. I can help someone process the death of God. I can help someone move from vertical morality to horizontal morality and how it works to build morality when morality is subjective. I can work with someone who is having a psychological crisis because they lost their belief of free will and they don't know how to handle that and they don't know how to orient with that knowledge. I can talk with someone who is so nihilistic that they ethically believe it's the right thing to do to end their life. This is an ethical conversation. This is a philosophical conversation, not a conversation where you just want to end your life because you're depressed. I get a lot of referrals for people in that space where their therapist feels uncomfortable with these kinds of clients because they haven't gone as far down into the void as their client, and so they have their own resistance coming up in therapy. I can talk to someone how to rebuild their family culture, coming up with something to say at dinner time for family dinner that reflects your values because you miss religion, the family dinners and prayer time that you used to have. We have very good data for children and how that decreases anxiety when you do things like that. I can actually talk with you where you come away with a few things that you can integrate into your family to be able to start rebuilding your family culture based on the culture that you came from. I can help you navigate fear of hell and walk you through some scriptures that scare you and give you some context and explanation and demystify it so that we can work through someone's fear of hell that's stopping them from a deconstruction. And a therapist may not want to talk with a person about scripture because that's not their job to dig into that. I can help someone who's been an absurdist but now finds it lacking and wants to explore other forms of existentialism that have a little bit more meat to it than what Camus provided. That's something a therapist may not be able to help with. Again, I can especially help with Mormons and Christians because I understand how their religious brain works, and I can catch ways that people are still operating under the scaffold of those old beliefs, things that therapists would miss if they haven't been raised in that religion. Now, you may call all of that philosophy or psychology, and that's fine. In the UK, because they are ahead of us in secularism, they have a job called philosophical counseling, where these topics, these existential concerns are very common. We don't have that job in America. In America, we are very wary of philosophy. My joke is that we are so scared of philosophy that we couldn't even have Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. We had to have the Sorcerer's Stone because we're more comfortable with sorcery than philosophy. So in America, that gap where therapists don't feel like they have the depth of religious studies and philosophy and spirituality, that gap is currently being filled by spiritual directors. That is who is addressing that niche. Not because we are taking advantage of this vague spiritual world and because we're all charlatans. It's because there's an actual gap here, a gap that I experienced personally in between religion and now my very full secular life, where I struggled, where therapy wasn't helpful enough. The other one that you mentioned was recovering from religion. That wasn't helpful for the level of philosophical concerns that I had at the time. It gives me personally a lot of meaning and purpose to help people who were once stuck in places that I got stuck. It helps people. It helps the secular movement. And I charge for my 20 years of experience in theology and philosophy and spirituality, just like a hairdresser charges for her time too. The alternative to that, if you think that you shouldn't be able to charge for your time in the space, and if you do, you're automatically a charlatan, just know I'm literally just talking about a living wage for me and my 4 children. Not Joel Osteen, not Deepak Chopra kind of stuff, just a living wage. And if I couldn't charge for that, I would have to leave this work and go work some kind of dead end job because I have no experience in anything else. And then religion wins by default. If we can't financially support people doing positive work and a secular approach to the space of spirituality, then religion wins by default. Mormonism wins by default because it gets 10% of the money from its people, and every other person, people who are doing good work in this space, have to work for free, part-time, while they have a day job. Mormonism wins if that's the structure that you want to set up, and that doesn't help anyone. Now, to my education that you called out, I do feel like this is a little bit of a low blow that is a bit unbecoming, because I'm just going to be vulnerable with you, Matt. I wish I would have had the opportunity to go to Claremont, to Harvard, to Cambridge, to pursue a career and be a real scholar in this space, a real peer-reviewed scholar. But this is me at 19 years old, getting Mormon married. I look 12. Getting Mormon married in a Mormon temple where I promised at the time to obey my husband while my husband obeyed God. I had children, and I put my husband's career and development first, like a good little Mormon girl. I was a teenager. I knew nothing else. I left Mormonism when I was a paid seminary teacher at the time. It just, destroyed my marriage. It destroyed my family relationships. I lost my identity and community and income and everything about me at the time. I found religion to be harmful and not true, and I paid the price. And I started my master's degree to understand religion better outside of Mormonism when I had just adopted 3 children. One was 2, one was 6 months, and one was a newborn. But I had a dear friend named Thomas J. Ord, and I coached his daughter's soccer team here in Boise. He lives here in Boise too. And I had a lot of theological and philosophical conversations with him, and he saw something in me. A bright mind, but one that was raw and undeveloped. And I studied under him at Northland Theological Seminary as an affordable way to be able to study one class at a time. I didn't go because they were handing out cheap degrees. I didn't go so I could get that cheap degree and scam people. I went there because that was the best that I could do. A little bit at a time at a flexible theology school under a mentor who saw something in me. I wish I had more academic credentials. I do. I hope that I'll go back and get the acronyms that people require. But it is not due to lack of character that I went there and not to Stanford. And after I finished my master's degree, I went on to a doctorate, not a PhD, just a doctorate. And when it was time to write my dissertation, I lost my faith in God altogether. What would you have wanted me to do? How is it not the right thing to then sign up for an 18-month program on non-religious, secular spirituality to learn how to help people in this space from a secular point of view, and use everything that I had learned up to that point for approaching these things from a secular viewpoint and helping people deconstruct from religion? All the things that I mentioned that I do, I learned how to do under the Spiritual Direction Program. That is the group of people in America that are currently attending to these deep concerns and deep existential shifts that happen when you deconstruct religion. At the end of the video, what feels the most unfair is that you said that you don't need gurus. And that implies, again, with you using the word charlatan, that I call myself a guru and that I'm a charlatan. That I got a cheap degree and a bogus certification to scam people in the spiritual space and take advantage of people. But to make that claim, you'd have to prove that I do scam people and that I set myself up as a guru. I specifically never sell any merchandise. I specifically tell people I am not a therapist and I am not a guru. If I'm asked with a client or a podcast or a live question, something that gets into politics or therapy or sex or relationships, I say I don't know, or I say I have an opinion on that, but it's outside my scope, so I won't say. I don't claim special knowledge. I don't claim to know what ultimate reality is. I don't even claim an ism that like I'm a this or that. I don't use words like energy. I don't claim a special relationship with the universe. Any client of mine will tell you that even when people try to teach me to treat me like their next prophet, I just mirror that back to them. And I help people find their own path post-religion, not follow me on mine. I don't have a 12 steps for life where you have to follow what I've done and live my life. I don't run retreats where I set myself up as a guru. I simply show up and say I'm a person who's been thinking and studying about spirituality and religion and philosophy and existentialism since I was a teenager. I've gathered some tools in my experience that may help you, and I charge a living wage for my time. And people find that it does help. My book, No Nonsense Spirituality, is still in the top 5 books in the category of atheism 2 years later. It has mostly 5-star reviews from atheists. I charge for my time and experience just to have a living wage to be able to do this work. So my last point is, what would you have rather me done, Matt Dillahunty? Would you rather have a Christian as the chaplain at Harvard Divinity School, or an atheist? Like Greg Epstein has been the humanist chaplain at Harvard Divinity School for decades, doing everything that is being talked about under the umbrella of spirituality from a secular point of view. And I really hope that I was able to defend my character, because my character is my only currency in this space. People trust my vulnerability and my honesty and my morality because I have no authority otherwise. And I gather that even at the end of this video, you will probably not choose the word spirituality. That's fine. If you were my client, which you're not, we would use different words. That's fine. Hitch liked the word numinous. Some people like well-being. That was his word for spirituality. The purpose of this video was not to try to convince you to be a spiritual person or to do work in spirituality or use the word spirituality. I think you're doing just fine with what you do for the secular community. I just wanted to say that I use it for specific purposes, fully validating that it's a problematic word and a problematic space, and I wish there were better secular ones. The purpose of this video is to say I think there's room in secularism for atheists like me. And I refuse to believe that we are so separate in our goals that we would need to have a full-on debate as if we weren't on each other's team. Any debate that you've ever been in, I would have been arguing on your side. There is room for spiritual atheists. There is a benefit to secularism by including this wing of people who have been trying to do whatever people have been doing that has been under the umbrella of spirituality with as secular and grounded approach as humanly possible. There's room for me, and there's room for Sam Harris, and there's room for Carl Sagan and others who are unashamed about inviting people from religion to bring their sense of the sacred, to bring the baby and leave the bathwater, to bring their spiritual experiences, and that we're not going to shame them for that because it's part of being human. And my last note, I really don't even want to do this because inevitably I'm going to get the comment that I'm just a part of the gender war. But I do think there's a little patriarchy in this conversation. Not because, calm down comment section, not because you're a man calling out a woman. I'm talking in this space, I deserve to be critiqued. it would be wrong to not critique me just because I'm a woman. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how spirituality has been defined in this conversation and how men, not Matt, just men in general, have been using a specifically male-oriented approach to the term spirituality. So Matt repeatedly frames spirituality as its only valid form would be a truth claim that can be debated, tested, falsified, and defended, like the universe having transcendent meaning or whatever. And he says that spirituality is devoid of testable, identifiable content, has no clear, testable, real propositions, and therefore is an unfalsifiable proposal based on vague feelings. And that is how specifically priest-class men historically have always defined spirituality. That men who have had the microphone in this space have defined spirituality as something that is propositional, that you make a proposition and you try to defend it with evidence. But women historically have had a different relationship to the word spirituality and to spiritual practice that is not as based on metaphysical propositions that have to be defended. So men will make up their roads to transcend this life, and they'll go to imaginary spiritual realms in their heavens and their meditative realms while they sit on mountains, or they'll take their oaths, or they go into apologetics of all trying to kind of like transcend this world and prove something external, right? And they've had this history with spirituality. And women have had a different experience with this word. Women tend to be more relational. Now, by what combination of nature and nurture, I cannot say. That's above my pay grade. But their brains tend to, on average, be more interrelated with itself, and they tend to be more relationally connected outside of themselves. And so spirituality is not just about escaping this world to a spiritual world that you have to make propositions about and authority about and then have to defend it or have evidence for and against it. Women often use the spiritual space as a way to delve deeper into themselves, into the earth, into relationships, into the world. And so a woman may be, on average, at least historically, less concerned with defining spirituality as logical, philosophical prepositions from systematic theology that you have to prove and disprove. They're more likely to say, this practice changes how I'm processing grief. This ritual helps mark a transition. This story gives me a feeling of moral courage. This inner work helped me to care about myself better. And that's a different form of spirituality. And women have never had the privilege to write scripture. They've never had the privilege to meditate for hours on a mountaintop and leave humanity. What they experience as spirituality is much more experiential, and it's rooted in human experience itself. So to define spirituality solely as whatever you can claim and prove about ultimate reality is patriarchal by definition. It disregards how half of humanity, the half that has never had the power to speak in this space, has had a different relationship to the word spirituality. And because of that, young women are leaving religion more than young men. They're tired of patriarchy defining what spirituality means, to what it means to live the good life when it doesn't fit their lives as women. And if we can include these voices, I think you'll find a much more broad concept of spirituality that has a lot more room than the room that you are giving it. So for example, when we started to do closed captioning, that was specifically for the deaf community, but we found that it helped everyone. Like, I prefer to listen to things with captions in it. And so I think if you add more voices, specifically female voices, into defining what spirituality is, you're going to get a lot more room, not just for women, but for everyone, for this concept of spirituality. And I think you're going to find in those definitions some more space to be able to interact with this word without it, just feeling like you have to reject the whole thing. So for example, for my 40th birthday, I got together with all the women in my life, and we created a ritual for moving from first half of life to second half of life. It had song and fire and story. I asked people, instead of a birthday present, to bring like a shared bit of wisdom. We did a ritual in a circle. We had some bread and wine to kind of reclaim the sacrament that life comes from our bodies and not from God. And everyone there knew that this was play. Nobody, not a single person there, because these are my friends, thought that this was capital R real, that this is capital M magic. There was nothing metaphysical happening. but it was a profound experience for everyone there, a top 3 experience of my life. And I know that there's many atheist men where when I even show them the science behind ritual, behind something like this, or show that women self-report feeling more connected or uplifted or lighter, or they processed emotions, or they feel more generous, etc. I can show them all the science. They still can't get themselves to attend something like that because it too much betrays their identity of just being a skeptic, just being anti, just being sometimes even just like being a logical robot. And for me, that would just be cutting off a part of myself. And so I think sometimes the men in the atheist space should be more honest about the ways that in this space there can be, just like in patriarchy, just like in patriarchal religion, some aspect of male peacocking. And I'm not calling you out specifically. Again, I'm just talking about in general in this space. There are times in this space when the men in this space specifically can become toxic in their own way. I've been to philosophy clubs where I'm the only woman in the room, and it's a bunch of men peacocking on who can quote philosophy better instead of an actual inquiry, actual conversation, actual experience, actual vulnerability in our human experience. And so that's an area where I think secularism can do better. Now, my last response to your critique is your statement that that spirituality is the Wild West and has no ethical guardrails, making it a place of just charlatans and scammers like me preying on people who are just struggling with life. And so I can meet you here on this critique for sure. It is fair, but it's something that I talk about every single day. I call out the Deepak Chopras and how they smuggle in bullshit with words like consciousness. And I call out the Jay Shettys and the Shannon Blakes and anyone who annoys me. It's something that I actually want to do less because I want to create more positive content. But all that space bothers me, and pretty much every day I call out what I consider to be spiritual charlatans. So just because it is the Wild West doesn't mean there aren't people working with ethical guidelines. I speak publicly about red flags and green flags, and because I do this publicly, I have to hold myself to those standards too, because those are the standards by which I will be called out for my own bullshit. I see my own mentors. I have people watching the ethics of my business. I praise in my posts the ways that other industrialized nations like France, for example, are limiting what you can say in the spiritual space. They don't allow you to have conferences, for example, when you promise that you can cure cancer by meditating in a certain way. I support ways that we can legalize psychedelics and include healthy ethical guardrails around that. Yes, I'm in the Wild West, but what is the alternative? Like in America, it's either too much order in religion where it's suffocating, where it's, hierarchy and all that, or it's chaos in the spiritual space. Both have a shadow side. Both have their problems. But that doesn't mean there aren't good people doing good work in the Wild West. And I hope and aspire to be one of those people. So your critique on that score, I think, would have landed better if you had some video that showed that I was acting unethically, or, some of my clients that I've had that, felt really uncomfortable with me and were calling me out or something, or that I was calling myself a guru, or that there's evidence of price gouging. Like, I give so much of my content away for free, as much as I possibly can. I give my courses away for free for anyone who will ask. I hope to be part of the solution where the Wild West becomes more ethical, so that people don't get scammed and into cults out here, but also so that they get some tools so they don't return back to religion. So overall, my response is that I align with Matt when it comes to skepticism in religion and spiritual spaces, to calling out gurus, which I do, for calling out bullshit under the umbrella of spirituality. I do this every single day, but that does not mean there is nothing here. And that does not necessarily mean that I'm a charlatan. And I choose that it is better for secularism to steal back this umbrella term spirituality. I think it helps against the monopoly that religion has. I think it's an arm of rebuilding in the deconstruction space, and there's not great secular words anyways. My credentials come mostly from me just being someone on TikTok, being honest about my human experience in 3 minutes at a time. I've never had a wife support my career. I've never had a secretary. I've never had any help at all. I have no team. I do this because it felt like the right thing to do with my education and experiences that I've had in my life. That doesn't make me a charlatan. It was literally the best thing that I could do as someone who woke up in my 30s with 4 children And as someone who's always thought about these things, no belief in God, a worthless piece of paper, and a knowledge that I was going to die someday. This felt like the best thing to do and the best approach of how to find meaningful work that supported my family when my career was never the focus. And I've studied nothing else but existential questions since I was 16 years old, and this feels like the best thing that I could do with a worthless degree in theology. And so now my question for the audience, if you've made it this far, is I have two questions. One, do you think it's okay for atheists to use the term spirituality? Because I'm open to being wrong there. I'm open to changing the language there. I don't believe that language reflects something ultimate about reality. Like, we can change language. I'm happy to change language if it feels like overall it's just too baggaged of a term for me to use. So one, is it okay for atheists to use this term spirituality? And number two, is there room in secularism for both me and Matt Dillahunty? Is there a purpose for both of the kinds of work that we're doing? And he doesn't need to do my work, and I wouldn't be great at doing what he does? Or do you see us as more diametrically opposed? So Matt, to you, I'm not much for debates of late because I don't believe people change their mind at debates, especially when they're debating something that's attached to their identity. The brain, as you know from debating so many apologists, it doesn't matter what you say. If your identity is wrapped around a particular worldview, you'll just find a way to justify it. So I don't really value debates as often. I prefer conversations. And you do have an identity, if I'm being honest. You have a solid and needed place in the secular community as a skeptic, as someone with a very sensitive BS meter. That is the service that you provide this community, and you do it better than anyone. And so I'm much more interested in having a conversation, because that will go deeper into the differences between us and like the root differences between us that cause us to approach this word spirituality differently, so that maybe we can understand each other and make space for each other, rather than have people vote on who won based on whoever they liked better anyways. So if you want to have a conversation about this, you have my email, as we recently connected over this video. I had a mutual friend introduce me. So you've got my email. If you see anything there that's worth having a conversation over, I'm certainly open to a conversation. If not, I hope at least I was able to defend my character here, because if I was truly acting in a way where I had lost all character and ethics, then I would and should lose all the credibility that I have, because I'm not just doing this for the money. Whatever money you think is in atheistic spirituality, trust me, the money is much better when I was in religion, and the money is better in cults, and I don't do either. So whatever money you think that I'm making in atheistic spirituality, it's really not great, especially when I do so much work turning people's power back to them, and helping them live their own lives and find their own paths that are going to be completely different than mine. That's not something that you do if you're wanting to gain followers or create a cult or be a charlatan. So I hope at least I was able to defend my character enough that you find me worthy of having a conversation. And to everyone who listened, I encourage you to watch Matt's video, which was only about 20 minutes long. I realized that my video is a lot longer, but I wanted to fully kind of flesh out the reasoning why I use the term spirituality. And I would really love to know what you think, because I could be really wrong about this, and I'm open to being wrong about how I use this term and why, and if it's good or bad for the secular community. So let me know what you think. And Matt, you've got my email. Bye, everyone. Hey everybody, it's Britt, new hoodie, who dis. I just got back from Boston. I was at Harvard Divinity School I was presenting a paper at simply receive raw reality. We interpret it, we organize it. All right, welcome everyone to a new episode of No Nonsense Spirituality with me, Britt Hartley, and Bill Reel of the Almost Awakened podcast. And we are joined today by Austin D. Valentino, who is a content creator that I saw pretty early on when he was a really small-time content creator. and I messaged him, and I really loved his content. And early on I said, like, you're going to blow up and you don't know it yet. And then he did. And I'm excited to bring him onto the channel. He is really doing well, has a large following on Instagram, where he explores topics in philosophy, religion, literature, and critical thinking. And last time I talked to him, he considered himself an atheist, but he's been shifting with that word. So we're going to get into that. Mm-hmm. And he's just really interested in questions around religion, morality, and meaning. And I've just been loving his content and had to have him on. So Austin, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I'm really excited. I have other questions of things that I would love to pick your brain about, as you spend so much time in so many philosophy books. But what I actually really want to go into more than that is like the story about how you got here. How did you get to be someone who comments so much on morality and religion, but more in kind of an atheist space? And I just really want to get a sense of your story. So start us off at the beginning and take us on a journey here.
Sure. So, of course, going to the content stuff, it's going to start with the motivation, which started very young. I was a strange kid. I always loved the folklore, myth, even religions that I saw very similar to mythologies. And there was nothing particularly special in regards to a philosophical sense, but I just had a draw to them. I could not explain it. I didn't care to explain it. I just loved them. And as I got older, my grandmother, who was a regression therapist who practically raised me, started to introduce me to philosophical themes, Dostoevsky, some Nietzsche, and I started to really work through difficult questions. And I started to wrestle with them further once I hit my teen years, and I wanted to be a little rebel and act it out. I come from a rough childhood, to say the least, and so you had no choice but to wrestle with them. And so I did. I went homeless voluntarily. I ran away from home when I was 16 years old. I dropped out of high school when I was 16. Never went back to high school, got my GED, never went back home. And so when you're in a 2007 Buick in late fall and it's cold and your car doesn't have heat, you're going to start asking some questions. And so I did. And it led me ultimately to go to college. I got my GED, went to college, and I just kind of stumbled into a philosophy class. I was originally a psychology major, so I wanted to understand, how people function, and to help people who had similar stories to me. And over the years doing GEs, I picked philosophy classes, not really knowing what they were. It just happened to be I was taking ethics, prejudice, discrimination, and morality. I took war and terrorism. I took Aztec philosophy. By the time I had done just 1 year in college, my professor asked me, Dr. Andrew Fitzgibbon, who I had on my show a couple of weeks ago, he's like, how many credits have you taken? I was like, I've taken like 18. He goes, yeah, you're a minor. Why don't you just pick it up? So I did. And then I just kind of fell in love with it more than I had the storytelling and the science behind psychology. I found philosophy to be better at answering the questions that I had. And so I threw myself into it. And I'm now finishing my undergraduate degree. I've taken double the amount of credits required for my degree in philosophy specifically. And then I also have a minor in religious studies, where I've done the same thing. I've taken double the amount that I needed. And so what I really do now is that I take these philosophical questions and I apply them into a very specific field, which is atheism. It's typically known as the philosophy of religion, though it sounds kind of antithetical to the idea. But they wrestle with the same topics, no matter what. You just take different approaches to them. And I decided to make content about it because I saw that the people, as I'm sure you guys have seen as well, the content creators that I saw weren't really doing philosophy. It was more pop philosophy, where you can kind of find it in almost any type of like self-help book. That weren't really like grappling with the foundation, the first principles of these problems. And so I decided to kind of just take that on myself, and it just blew up a lot more than I had expected, especially in such a short time.
I want to go back. You said your grandmother introduced you to some of these questions. At what age were you?
So I would have the questions first, right? Because I was like, she was a regression therapist. So
Yeah.
I grew up around, spirituality, deep spirituality, heavily influenced by Buddhism, heavily influenced by your typical spiritualist thoughts. And so any questions that I had, my grandma was there to answer them.
How old do you think those started, though? Like, what age were you when you're delving into things that sometimes people aren't even thinking about either their entire life or not until their 30s or 40s?
Yeah, I couldn't have been more than 13.
So
when I was wrestling with them.
Yeah. So if I go back to our conversation, Britt and I, after our last interview, we stayed after to have a conversation about that interview and about some other things. And one of the things we went into was when you introduce big ideas to young kids, whether that's positive or negative. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are, because I think there is some danger and some benefit, so risk reward, of introducing younger youth, maybe even younger children, to really big ideas and sort of getting them to think outside the box for the first time. Your thoughts on the impact on you? I mean, it sounds like it's been a great thing in the long run. for you, but maybe caused some challenges early on.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, definitely my grandmother was not, in my face telling me, life doesn't have any meaning. Thankfully, she was not. In fact, it was quite the opposite. She would work with people in passing. So she would walk people through the other side, whatever that means. But it meant a lot to her and it meant a lot to me as a young kid. And so the questions that I had were, is there life after death? Is there God? Why is there so much evil in the world? And she never evaded my questions. There wasn't a single time where she was like, listen, I don't want to talk with you about that. And she answered all of them. And so to a certain extent, it was incredible. She did not limit my exploration in the slightest. She just let me go. Wherever I wanted to go, she was there, recommended me books from Dr. Brian Weiss, Raymond Moody. And then as I got older, we got over to Dostoevsky and Nietzsche. Carl Jung, very specifically for her, she's a Jungian individual. But so to a certain extent, it's great to let a kid's mind explore. It can certainly have detrimental effects. But, I don't think that a kid should be really questioning, or at least should be provided an answer that life has no meaning. You can even frame it in a way that you can evade the question while also answering it, which I think is what she did, really. Which is, does God exist? Well, Austin, we are gods. God is within us, and we are within God. And that's typically the answer that I got. And what she meant by God, couldn't tell you. I have no idea. Actually, something I would like to talk with her about that now that this is kind of like where I explore it. So that is what I explore, by the way. I do what is God, what is atheism. That's typically my realm. And all of that work that I did, all the questions I had when I was a kid, led me to exactly where I am. And in that, it's been great for me. I can definitely say, though, that I would say that it probably had a negative effect in the way that I communicated with other kids. No one else was really interested in spirituality in the way that I was. No one else was interested in the books that I wanted to read and talk about. So I was like that nerdy kid to a certain extent. But that generally came out afterwards, after like my rebel age, if that's what you want to call it, because I went downhill really hard and I hit rock bottom pretty hard. Which then once I came out of it, I was like, oh, right, spirituality. And I got right back into that.
So I think I assumed, because of your name, Reason and Religion, and because you were doing atheism content, I kind of just assumed that you were one of those many people who went to theology school, was a part of an organized religion, turned to atheism at some point when things didn't, add up. But you were really never a part of like an institutional like form of Christianity or something like that. You just would say like you had deep existential questions as a kid and spirituality around you, and you just found that place really interesting. Like what was it about religion that, like, why Reason and Religion? Because I just kind of assumed that you had like a Christian background and went to theology school or something.
Yeah, I definitely didn't go to theology school. Not yet, at least. My applications are in, so I'm waiting to hear back. So yeah, I grew up spiritualist and like that type of realm. My father is a Roman Catholic, and Di Valentino, a heavy Italian family, and so everyone around me was a Roman Catholic on my dad's side of the family, and my mom's side very spiritualist. When I turned 22, I got really interested in Christianity. Not even in a spiritual sense at the beginning, but just like historically and philosophically. I started to read like people like C.S. Lewis. I got into Dale Allison's work for the historicity of the resurrection and stuff like that. And then I did kind of leaned into Christianity pretty hard. And I believed it to a certain extent. And then an event happened, which I'm sure we can talk about. That
yeah, please.
Yeah. So May 20th, 2024, my stepdad was killed pretty brutally, and so unjustly, I can't really go into like legal reasons, like the details of it and what happened, but just know there was a lot of questions about justice, evil, suffering, teleology and stuff like that. And so I believed it, and then I started to ask questions, and I blindly threw myself in. I started to have panic attacks where consistently all day long, um, where my blood pressure would reach like 170 over 110. I went to the hospital 5 times for it. It was death anxiety. I couldn't handle the idea that he was here and he wasn't, and that can.
Complete this. Sophia Esports Global Rally Tour. Online Open Qualification. Set your fastest time in the 2026 FIA Esports Global Rally Tour Online Qualification. For a chance to take part in your respective on-site regional shootout. The leaderboard will be open between 12 May 2026 at 0 and 25 May, and only time submitted within this period will be valid. Ooh. Took place in Shanghai, December. Can be found on the official website. By participating in this competition, you acknowledge that 505 Games will share your Steam ID and certain leaderboard performance data, including your time ranking and country of origin, with the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, for the purpose of administering the competition, including verifying results and determining eligible winners. FIA will process this data as an independent data controller in accordance with its own privacy policy. Let's go. Pero esta vez sí voy a start sequence. How can I check my options? Bueno. Normal. $452. Oh, I'm gonna match that. oh, what the heck? Hmm. What the heck? Hello? Automatic. Yeah, ahora sí. No, ¿qué pedo? Se bugueó. A ver, y si avanzo. No. Something went wrong. Que su madre. Damn. That's very interesting. Nice. Qué bueno que se arregló, ¿no? Wow. Y eso que está a tope, a ver, espérame. Ay, güey, espérame. ABS. Creo que está mejor el uno. turn it off completely de aquí, ¿no? Why is it doing that, bro? A ver. Mm. What? Restart. Iba bien. Ya me acomodé mejor sin ABS. Manual. Complete. Quick. A ver, por lo mientras voy a también intentar así. Late. A ver. Forgotten Gods. No me acuerdo si me gusta esto.
it could be. People can't even agree on what the most fundamental aspect of consciousness even is. Most people can't even agree whether consciousness is real or not. Like, some people just think it's an illusion. They can't seem to decide whether material reality creates consciousness or whether consciousness creates material reality. Of course, I've got my own weird thoughts on all of this, but today I thought it might be a cool idea to explore the weird bugs in consciousness, the glitches, the inconsistencies, the things that don't really seem to make sense no matter how you think about them. I do have one weird one that I've never heard someone else bring up before, but I'd like to share with you at the end as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first thing I'll bring up is the Mary's Room thought experiment. So
The compact disc delivers crisp, high-fidelity audio in a portable form factor with a 16-bit signal and a staggering 74 minutes of playtime. It's the sound of the future. Make memories to good music. Invest in quality headphones. Always make a soundtrack, because pretty soon you won't be listening to music. You'll be listening to who you were. Tonight's playlist is important. It's a retrospective of greatest hits to accompany our last night together in the Big Suck. A milestone like this requires preparation, a schedule. One must think ahead to experience the now. These are the last hours of our high school affair. It's romantic. I want to say something lighthearted, so I say, I bet one of us dies this time.
Oh shit, we're going.
Wow, bro. Se ve que es modern music, man. Qué increíble se ve. Exit.
You almost ate.
Share the road, airhead! I got the wobble! Core! And another core! Core!
Treachery! Subterfuge!
Grab on! We'll take you over the bridge!
You giddy bitch! Tonight, we're invited to Camille Cole's beach party. It's the tits, it's the jam, everyone's gonna be there. College kids, rich kids, athletes, horse girls, skaters. It's teenage high society. Right now, we have no booze, but we do have some leads. We'll start at my house, then on to Cassandra's, free drinks at our secret hideout, then arrive beachside at 9:45 p.m. It could be one of our greatest hits.
Was that Kyle driving?
Yeah, I thought he was playing football at Colorado.
Maybe he's going to the party.
Think he can buy us some vodka?
I'll ask him.
Hey, Kyle.
Yo, Kyle, you buy us some vodka? Don't think he ain't heard me. Your folks home?
My dad's home, yeah.
Lame.
I thought we were riding together.
I didn't want to get all sweaty and shit.
Fair. You know the music that plays before a concert? Bands always use the same playlist when they're setting up the stage. That's because it's a countdown. Roadies know when their jobs begin, when they finish, and when the playlist ends, the show begins. This playlist, the one you'll be hearing today, is a countdown to my last night in Blue Moon Lagoon.
You're still going through with this?
Afraid so. I leave for the airport at 6 a.m.
You've ruined our road trip.
I know this.
What's the name of this woman who's tearing us apart?
Bella Deltone.
So you fly to New York, you give this woman your mixtape, and what, she just hires you?
After she listens to the mixtape, yeah. I'll become the world's foremost music supervisor.
What's a music supervisor?
It's a great question, Slater.
Imagine before you all the music of human history. Every sonnet, symphony, rock song, and radio jingle. A vast gallery of sound. This is the domain of the music supervisor. It's their job to curate a soundtrack that frames and elevates the narrative, whether it's a film, a play, or a television program. Stacy Rockford has wanted to be a music supervisor since 8th grade. I'm told her mixtapes are spectacular, though I've never heard one myself.
Once Bella Deltone hears my mixtape, she'll make me her protege.
But why?
Because my mixtapes bend others to my will. It's a strange, almost cosmic talent.
Unbelievable.
The next track is Just Like Honey by the Jesus and Mary Chain. A perfect bedroom hangout vibe. Might be the last time we're all in my room together. Huh.
Sweetie, have you called her sister? Yet? Is she picking you up from the airport?
No! Stop pressuring me!
Sorry, sweetie.
I smiled for every photo before junior year, but then Slater made me metal. Vague, brown, of unknown origin. EM17 boombox. Taped a lot of radio on this thing. Now relegated to the hallway. I smiled for every photo before junior year, but then Slater made me metal. My hair care products are filth and malevolence.
We gonna get your stash and keep going?
That's a rookie move.
Yeah, have we taught you nothing, Cassandra?
What?
We all go up to my room and immediately bolt? Dad, give away you're grabbing booze.
Fastest way to get your bag checked. 20 minutes, minimum.
Where was Camille Cole's party last year?
Her uncle's houseboat.
And it sank.
No way.
A bit.
Yeah, not all the way.
Absolute blowout. Billy Idol was there.
I think it was just a guy who looked like Billy Idol.
Slater,
Cha!
you think you'll ever cut your hair?
You know, people say cutting your hair is not metal. But you know what's not metal?
What?
Caring about people's hair.
Ah, true. Slater bought this for me from a discount bin in Nampa. Boards are trending narrow with small wheels. I'm against it. Bad for ride quality. Boards are trending narrow with small wheels. I'm against it. Bad for ride quality. Aerodisc portable turntable. More aesthetic than high fidelity. Gets the job done.
Uh-huh. Hey. Yo, yo. What's up? Yo, yo. Uh-huh. Hey.
What's that stuff?
A mixtape from Colin Bruce?
No way, Loverboy!
Yeah. He gave me this after the incident. I totally forgot about it.
Put it on.
No, it's not on today's playlist.
Put it on.
Put it on!
Aw, come on. This should do it. My first kiss was with Colin Bruce. I didn't like Colin at all, but he was accessible, and honestly, I just wanted to get it out of the way. It was everything I hoped it wouldn't be. The mixtape he made me is entitled Music That Explains How You Make Me Feel, and the opening track is the 10-minute instrumental Odyssey, Galaxy, and Turia by Alice Coltrane, released in 1971. Totally ruined it for me. That's enough.
You could put it off, you know, going to New York.
My cash is spent. The time is now. If I have to get a job here, shit. I can't work in the fucking kayak shack. The radio's on smooth hits 24/7 and drown myself.
You were in my dream a couple of nights ago.
Were we doing it?
No, we were trying to buy plants. Like, potted plants.
Wow.
Then we were in the gym when we lost the plants.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Lame.
Lame.
And then we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Nice.